You'd have to search far and wide to find a sucker like your wife. She works like a horse, and we get to live at her expense." My mother-in-law cackled, completely unaware that I heard every single word. Immediately after that, I locked all my bank cards and called a moving company to evict both my mother-in-law and my husband, and what happened next left them absolutely stunned. But before we begin, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and enjoy the story. Valerie never imagined that her life could change so drastically because of one random encounter. That March day, she drove to a major construction and home building expo in downtown Chicago. It was strictly business. Her small but highly successful remodeling and construction firm was in desperate need of new material suppliers. While standing at a ceramic tile booth and flipping through a catalog, she felt someone's eyes on her. A man in his mid-30s, wearing an expensive suit and a confident smile, handed her his business card. "Arthur Palmer, real estate developer," he introduced himself. "And you must be an interior designer? You have such a professional eye for materials." Valerie laughed. The compliment sounded genuine, lacking the rehearsed sleaziness she usually encountered. "Valerie Cross, owner of a construction firm. I'm looking for reliable suppliers, not just admiring the aesthetics." "Even better," Arthur replied without missing a beat. "Why don't we discuss a potential partnership over coffee? I actually have some proposals that might interest you." Over cappuccinos at a cafe on the ground floor of the Expo Center, Arthur talked about his projects: a new residential complex in the suburbs, a gated community of townhouses, massive plans for expansion. He spoke with absolute confidence, dropping specific numbers and timelines like an industry veteran. "Has your firm been on the market for long?" Valerie asked. 5 years. Started small, but we're pushing serious volume now. Palmer Development, maybe you've heard of us?" Valerie shook her head. There were thousands of construction firms in the Chicagoland area. It was impossible to know them all. "No worries," Arthur smiled. "The main thing is that business is booming. How long have you been in the industry?" 7 years. Started with flipping apartments. Now we build custom private homes." The conversation flowed easily. Arthur turned out to be a fascinating conversationalist, armed with a great sense of humor and completely devoid of the aggressive flirting that men usually resorted to at business events. "Would you like to continue this?" he suggested as the expo was closing. "There's a great steakhouse not far from here." Valerie hesitated for a second. For the past 3 years, she had buried herself entirely in her work. Her personal life had been completely pushed to the back burner, but there was something undeniably charming about this man. "All right," she agreed. Over dinner, they didn't just talk about work. Arthur shared that he lived with his mother, who had raised him alone after his father passed away. Valerie shared her plans for expanding her firm and her dream of building her own house in the suburbs. "We have a lot in common," Arthur noted at the end of the night. "Both workaholics, both building our futures with our own 2 hands." The following weeks flew by like a dream. Arthur was a highly attentive gentleman. He called every day, invited her to the theater, to art galleries, to the best spots in the city. Valerie slowly stepped out of her exhausting work-homework routine and allowed herself to actually enjoy life. A month into their relationship, she decided to look up his firm, not out of distrust, but simply out of her professional habit of researching potential partners. She typed Palmer Development into Google and frowned. The company's website looked incredibly cheap, like it had been thrown together in an hour. There were only 3 completed projects in the portfolio, and all of them were minor cosmetic jobs. Valerie called an architect friend. "Hey, Michael, have you ever heard of Palmer Development? The CEO is Arthur Palmer." "No, doesn't ring a bell." "Why looking to partner up? Just getting acquainted for now." "Hold on, let me check the state registry." 5 minutes later, Michael called back. "Weird. The LLC is registered, but there are no major projects tied to it. Palmer is the sole owner, but the registered capital is the absolute legal minimum." Valerie felt a knot form in her stomach. So, Arthur had exaggerated the scale of his business. On the other hand, many young entrepreneurs loved to inflate their successes to look good. It wasn't necessarily a reason to break things off. On their next date, She carefully probed, "Could you show me some of your job sites? I'd love to see your work in person." Arthur suddenly looked uncomfortable. "All the projects are in the permitting phase right now. Red tape, zoning board stuff. You know how it is. But as soon as we break ground, I'll absolutely show you." The answer seemed evasive, but Valerie didn't push it. It was entirely possible he was just hitting a bureaucratic wall. By summer, their relationship had grown serious. Arthur frequently spent the night at Valerie's apartment. They planned a joint vacation and talked about the future. He was affectionate and caring, always remembered the little things, and fully supported her business ambitions. "You know," he said one evening while lying on the couch in her apartment, "what if we got married?" Valerie looked up from her laptop. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely. I know I want to spend the rest of my life with you. You're smart, beautiful, driven. Women like you are one in a million." Valerie's heart fluttered. At 31, she had never been married, having sacrificed everything for her career. But with Arthur, everything felt right and natural. "Yes," she said quietly. "Yes, I want to." Arthur pulled her into a hug and whispered, "We're going to have a beautiful wedding. I want you to have the best memories." Wedding planning began immediately. Arthur suggested a modest ceremony at City Hall, followed by a banquet for 50 people at a nice restaurant. "I'm not a fan of massive, flashy weddings," he explained. "I'd rather we spend the money on a honeymoon. Let's do Europe, see the world." Valerie agreed. She didn't want a loud, stressful wedding either. But when it came down to paying the actual deposits, a strange situation arose. "Listen, honey," Arthur said, reviewing the invoices from the venue and the florist. "All my liquid cash is currently tied up in a new project. It's incredibly lucrative, but the funds are frozen in escrow. Do you think you could cover the wedding expenses for now, and I'll pay you back later?" Valerie frowned. "What project?" "A residential complex on the north side. I have a major investor, but until the final city permits are issued, no capital can be withdrawn. You understand, right? This is an investment in our family's future. Once this project launches, we'll be set for years." It sounded logical. Valerie knew exactly how the construction business worked. Massive projects often required freezing millions of dollars for months on end. "All right," she agreed. "But show me the project blueprints and contracts. I'm curious what kind of build it is." "Of course. They're with my partner right now. We're meeting next week. I'll grab copies for you." But next week, he forgot the documents. Then his partner was supposedly out of town. Then the paperwork was supposedly with their legal team undergoing an audit. Valerie eventually stopped asking, completely consumed by the wedding preparations. The wedding itself was lovely. Arthur's mother, Martha, made a wonderful impression. A modest, polite woman in her late 50s, she worked as a billing clerk at a local medical clinic and lived alone in a 2-bedroom apartment. "I've always dreamed of a daughter-in-law like you," she confessed to Valerie during the reception. "My Artie is a good boy, but his head is always in the clouds. With your brains, you two will be unstoppable." After the wedding, the newlyweds planned to rent a larger apartment, as Valerie's 1-bedroom was too cramped for 2 people. "I found a fantastic place," Arthur announced a week after they got their marriage license. 3 bedrooms, great neighborhood, newly renovated. The landlord wants $3,500 a month. The rent was steep, but Valerie made a very good income. They agreed to split the expenses 50-50, though Arthur once again cited his temporary liquidity issues. "The second my project funds unlock, I'm taking over all the bills," he promised. On the morning of their moving day, they were packing up boxes. Valerie was wrapping dishes when Arthur's phone rang. "Hello? Mom, what's wrong?" Arthur's face went pale. "Your blood pressure? We'll be right there." He grabbed his car keys. "What happened?" Valerie asked, alarmed. "It's my mom." Her blood pressure spiked. Her neighbor found her on the kitchen floor. "We have to go." They rushed to Martha's apartment. The woman was lying on the sofa, pale, with a damp towel draped across her forehead. "Artie, my sweet boy," she groaned weakly. "My head is spinning so badly. I'm terrified to be alone. Mom, should I call 911? No, I'm feeling a bit better." I'm just so scared of having another episode. Arthur paced the living room nervously. Val, what if we just stayed here for a while? He suggested. Just a month or two, until Mom recovers. We can rent that apartment later. Valerie looked at her pale mother-in-law, then at her panicked husband. Of course, she said, family comes first. Martha offered a weak, trembling smile. Oh, Val, honey, you are so kind. I promise I'll get better quickly. I'll try to stay out of your hair. That very same day, they redirected the movers to bring their things to the mother-in-law's apartment. Arthur's childhood bedroom was small, but fine for a temporary stay. A month will fly by, Arthur said, hugging his wife. And Mom is so happy we're close. Valerie nodded. Truly, what was a month? At least Martha would feel safe. The very next day, Martha looked miraculously cured. She was making breakfast, cleaning, and humming a tune in the kitchen. How are you feeling? Valerie asked. Oh, so much better, Martha beamed. I must have just been overly stressed yesterday. You know how it is at my age. Definitely don't need a doctor. The most important thing is that my kids are here with me. Valerie felt a twinge of confusion. Yesterday, her mother-in-law looked like she was on death's door, and today she was bursting with energy. Sure, the human body is unpredictable, but such a rapid turnaround felt a bit strange. Over breakfast, Martha asked about Valerie's work, their plans, and pressed for details about their relationship. When are you planning the honeymoon? She asked. We're putting it on hold for now, Arthur answered. My project requires me to be on call 24/7. Ooh, what project? The mother-in-law asked. Arthur hesitated for a split second. A residential complex. Huge build, lots of moving parts. How fascinating. Is it far from here? Up on the north side, but it's just groundwork right now. Valerie noticed that her husband spoke about his supposed massive project reluctantly, completely lacking the manic enthusiasm entrepreneurs usually have when discussing multi-million-dollar deals. That evening, when they were alone, she decided to ask directly, Arthur, can you please just show me the project blueprints? I'm a builder too. I can give you professional feedback. He turned to look out the window. Val, it's covered under an NDA. My partners strictly forbid showing the financials or blueprints to third parties. I'm not a third party. I'm your wife. I know, but a contract is a contract. Just be patient. You'll see everything soon. The excuse was flimsy, but Valerie decided not to push it. Maybe he really was bound by a strict non-disclosure agreement. A week went by. Martha felt fantastic, but the topic of moving out was never brought up. On the contrary, the mother-in-law constantly talked about how wonderful it was for all of them to live together. It's so economical and cozy, she would say. Why throw money away on rent when there's plenty of space here? Valerie began to realize that this temporary solution was going to drag on, and that was just the beginning. 1 month turned into 2, then 3. Every time Valerie brought up renting their own place, new reasons magically appeared to delay the move. Mom isn't fully 100% yet, Arthur would say. And what's the rush? We're saving a ton of money. We can put it towards something useful. Something useful usually meant funding the household's endless needs. First, Martha's refrigerator started making a suspicious noise. Then the washing machine stopped spinning clothes properly. Then they desperately needed new living room furniture. Val, honey, her mother-in-law said, flipping through a Pottery Barn catalog. This sectional is simply made for our living room. I know it's a bit pricey, but you can't put a price on quality. Valerie paid for it, trying not to think about her hemorrhaging bank account. After all, they were saving on rent. And family is family. If they needed help, why not help? But gradually, she began to notice glaring inconsistencies in her husband's behavior. Every morning, Arthur would get dressed in a tailored suit, grab his leather briefcase, talk about urgent meetings and crucial deadlines, and leave the house. He would return late in the evening, sighing about how exhausted and irritated he was. How are things on the site? Valerie would ask regularly. Moving at a snail's pace. Bureaucracy is a nightmare. One permit gets denied, an inspection gets delayed. But we should get the green light soon. One day in late summer, Valerie finished a client meeting early and decided to surprise Arthur at his office to take him to lunch. He had mentioned his office was in a high-rise business center downtown. She walked into the lobby and approached the security desk. "Hi, I'm looking for Palmer Development. Which floor is it on?" The security guard checked his computer and frowned. "Palmer Development? Never heard of it. Are you sure?" "Ma'am, I've worked this desk for 2 years. I know every corporate tenant in this building. There's no Palmer here." Valerie felt a spike of anxiety. Had Arthur moved offices and forgotten to tell her, or did she get the address wrong? She dialed his number. "Hey, babe," Arthur answered brightly. "Where are you right now?" "On site, at the Northside project." "Why? What's up?" "I wanted to swing by your office and take you to lunch." "Ah, man, today is totally booked. I'm drowning in contractor disputes. I'll be on my feet all day. Let's just do dinner at home." Valerie hung up the phone with a sickening feeling in her gut. Something in his voice sounded incredibly unnatural, like he was scrambling to cover his tracks. A week later, pure chance blew the lid off the situation. Valerie was driving to a client meeting and got stuck in traffic near a massive suburban shopping mall. As she glanced at the mall entrance, she saw a familiar figure. Arthur, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, was casually strolling through the automatic doors. It was 1:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Maybe he was on his lunch break, or having a business meeting at a restaurant inside. She pulled her SUV into the parking lot and followed him. She took the escalator to the second floor, scanning the food court and cafes, but he wasn't there. She checked the lower level. Nothing. Finally, she took the elevator to the third floor, where the AMC movie theater was located. There he was. Her husband was standing at the kiosk, buying a ticket for a matinee showing. Alone, Valerie ducked behind a structural column and watched. Arthur looked completely relaxed, not a care in the world. He bought a large popcorn, a Coke, and strolled into the theater. Her reality tilted on its axis. Instead of working, her husband was going to the movies in the middle of a Tuesday. What happened to the urgent meetings, the contractor disputes, the massive project? Valerie sat down on a mall bench and tried to process this. Was he so stressed about his failing project that he was hiding at the movies to cope? People handle stress differently. But the doubt gnawed at her like acid. That evening over dinner, she carefully asked, "How are things on the job site?" "We finally sorted out the contractor dispute." "Barely, but we managed." Arthur lied smoothly, not looking up from his plate. "But tomorrow is going to be brutal. Back-to-back meetings. The project is so complex, fires are popping up everywhere." He was lying. She felt it in her marrow. But why? And more importantly, where was he actually spending his days if not at an office or a job site? The next day, she decided to follow him. She parked down the street and watched as Arthur left the apartment in his suit with his briefcase. She tailed his car from a safe distance. He didn't drive to the north side where his supposed multi-million-dollar project was. He drove straight to a different shopping plaza. He parked, stayed in his car for a few minutes, and walked inside. Valerie waited 30 minutes before following him in. She found him sitting in a Panera Bread, drinking coffee with another guy in his 40s. She got close enough to hear them. "Man, the Bears actually looked decent yesterday," Arthur was saying, laughing. "That touchdown in the fourth quarter was insane." "Yeah, they got lucky. I lost a $50 bet on the Packers. No business negotiations, no construction talk, just two guys killing time." Valerie turned around and walked out, feeling her blood turn to ice. Arthur was actively deceiving her. Every single day, he played the role of a busy executive, when in reality, he was a total deadbeat. But if he wasn't working, where was his money coming from? He still bought her small gifts and occasionally contributed to the household, even if it was a fraction of what Valerie paid. That night, she decided to confront him. "Arthur, we need to have a serious conversation." "About what?" He grabbed the TV remote and settled onto the couch. "About your job. I saw you at the mall today in the middle of the afternoon." Arthur froze, his thumb hovering over the remote. "What do you mean you saw me?" "You were sitting in Panera with a buddy, talking about football, during business hours." Silence hung in the room for several agonizing seconds. Then Arthur let out a heavy sigh. "All right, fine. I'll tell you the truth. The project got suspended, the investor pulled out. The funds are completely frozen. I'm technically out of a job right now. For how long? About 4 months. 4 months. That meant almost from the moment they met, Arthur hadn't had a steady income. But you kept talking about meetings, contractors, site visits. I didn't want to stress you out. I thought I'd find a new investor or a new job quickly. In the meantime, I've been networking with old buddies, trying to find leads. It sounded somewhat plausible. Valerie felt a tiny sliver of relief. So it wasn't a malicious scam, just a proud man trying to save face. Arthur, why hide it? We're a team. We can figure this out together. I know. I was just ashamed. I couldn't admit my business failed. It happens. The main thing is not to give up. She hugged him. Thank you for understanding, he whispered. I'll find something great soon, I promise. But another month passed, and Arthur was still networking at Paneras and AMC theaters. Valerie saw zero actual effort to secure employment. Why don't you come work for my firm? She offered one evening. I could really use a sharp sales manager. No, Arthur replied far too quickly. I'm used to being my own boss, not taking orders. I need to start my own thing again. The answer stung. It meant her husband would rather sit around doing nothing at her expense than swallow his pride and do an honest day's work. Meanwhile, the expenses were spiraling out of control. Martha constantly invented new emergencies that required Valerie's credit card. Val, honey, Martha said one morning, the fridge is barely keeping things cold. The milk is spoiling. We're throwing money in the garbage. Should I call a repairman? Oh, what's the point of fixing that old junk? It's better to just buy a new one. A high-quality fridge will last us a decade. A new French door smart fridge cost $2,500. Valerie paid for it, even though the old one had seemed perfectly fine to her. A week later, they desperately needed a new washing machine. A month after that, a $1,500 AC unit for the living room. It's impossible to survive the summer heat without AC, her mother-in-law explained. And you young people need to protect your health. Every single purchase was justified under the guise of caring for the family. Valerie was beginning to realize that Martha was an expert manipulator, but it was incredibly awkward to say no. The woman had taken them into her home, cooked, and cleaned. It felt ungrateful to refuse. In the fall, an incident occurred that forced Valerie to reevaluate everything. Arthur asked her for cash to process some onboarding certifications for a new job. I found an incredible position, he announced proudly. A major developer is hiring a VP of sales, great salary, full benefits, but I need to pay for a specialized background check, some union certifications, and get my physical done. It's going to be about $400 out of pocket. Valerie happily handed over the cash, thrilled that her husband had finally found a job. But 3 days later, while gathering clothes for the dry cleaners, she reached into the pocket of Arthur's blazer. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. She opened it and felt the floor drop out from underneath her. It was an official statement from the State Department of Labor. It stated that Arthur Palmer had been actively collecting unemployment benefits. The issue date on the letter was from 8 months ago. 8 months. That meant long before they even met. He was completely unemployed. Valerie sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking as she held the state letter. So, Arthur had lied about his entire existence from day one. He had introduced himself as a successful developer, but in reality, he was a broke, unemployed grifter. But wait, if he wasn't working, how did he survive? Where did he get the money for dates, theater tickets, restaurant bills? The answer hit her like a freight train. His mother, he was living off his mother's dime, and now, they had tag-teamed to upgrade to a much better ATM, Valerie. The mother-in-law buys expensive appliances using Valerie's credit card, and the son leeches off her daily income. This wasn't just poor financial management. This was a calculated, deliberate scam. Valerie stormed out of the bedroom and marched into the kitchen, where Martha was washing dishes. Martha, what is this Facebook Marketplace listing? What listing? Sweetie, the one for the brand new iPhone. The exact same iPhone I bought you yesterday. The mother-in-law froze, a wet plate in her hands. The kitchen was dead silent for 5 agonizing seconds. Val, it's just a misunderstanding. What misunderstanding? You listed a $1,200 phone for sale for $800. Oh, I was just joking around with my friend Linda. I told her. Look at this fancy gift. I could probably sell it. And she must have posted it online as a joke. I already told her to take it down. The lie was so painfully, insultingly stupid that Valerie didn't even bother arguing. She turned around and walked back to her room without a word. That evening at dinner, no one mentioned the iPhone incident. Martha acted like nothing had happened, cheerfully chatting about her day at the clinic. Why don't we go shopping this weekend? She suggested. I need a new dress for church, and Artie needs some new dress shirts for his job. What job? Valerie looked at her husband, who was intensely focused on cutting his steak, refusing to make eye contact. Did you get the job, Arthur? She asked coldly. Not officially yet, but I have the final interview on Monday. I need to look sharp. Another excuse to siphon money. Valerie realized she was living in a house where she was viewed exclusively as a walking bank account. Every request, every purchase, every decision revolved around her wallet. The next day, she made a decision. She was going to give him an ultimatum. Either he gets a legitimate job within 30 days, or she was filing for divorce. But when she got home from work, a surprise was waiting for her in the living room. Massive cardboard boxes were stacked against the wall. A 7.5-inch TV, a surround sound system, and a $1,000 espresso machine. What is all this? She asked her mother-in-law. Oh, Val, you won't believe it. Best Buy was having a massive clearance event. Artie walked in, saw the prices, and decided to treat the family. Valerie checked the retail stickers on the boxes. The total cost was well over $4,000. With whose money? Well, I gave him the card, Martha mumbled, looking away. From the joint family account, the joint account that was funded 100% by Valerie's company profits. Why would you buy all of this without asking me? Sweetie, it's for all of us. We can watch movies together, listen to music, drink fancy coffee. Valerie walked around the boxes. High-end, luxury items they absolutely did not need. Their old TV worked perfectly fine. Martha, where are the receipts? What receipts? The purchase receipts. If this stuff doesn't fit, I need to know we can return it. The mother-in-law started fidgeting. Artie forgot them. He said the cashier put them in the boxes. Valerie sliced open the boxes with a box cutter. There were no receipts inside. Strange. Which Best Buy did he go to? Oh, I don't remember. Ask Artie. But Arthur wasn't home. According to his mother, he was finalizing details with his new employer. Valerie pulled out her phone and called him. Hey, babe. Arthur answered cheerfully. Where are you? At a meeting. With upper management. We're negotiating my compensation package. Which company is this again? Apex Builders, huge general contractor. Amazing benefits. I won't be home until late. They want to take me out to dinner to celebrate. Valerie hung up the phone and thought. Apex Builders. She knew them well. They were one of her direct competitors. If Arthur was actually interviewing there, it would be incredibly easy to verify. She dialed a contact she had in Apex's HR department. Hey, Dave. Quick question. Do you guys have a guy named Arthur Palmer in for a final interview today? Arthur Palmer? No. Doesn't ring a bell. Are you sure? He said he was meeting with upper management right now. Valerie, I'm 100% sure. We aren't hiring any VPs right now, and the entire executive team is at a conference in Wisconsin today. The office is a ghost town. Valerie thanked him and hung up. So, Arthur was lying again. There was no interview. He just didn't want to come home and face the music regarding the $4,000 electronics binge. And the purchases themselves demanded an explanation. Valerie opened her banking app and reviewed the joint account history. It was a bloodbath. Over the last 3 months, their household expenses had nearly doubled her incoming salary. If this continued, her business cash reserves would be wiped out in 6 months. What then? Credit cards? Loans? Would Arthur magically find a job then? Based on his behavior, he had absolutely zero intention of ever working again. Why break a sweat when you have a wife funding your life? That evening, Arthur came home looking incredibly smug and relaxed. How was the meeting? Valerie asked. Fantastic. Got a second round follow-up tomorrow. Pretty sure I have the job in the bag at Apex. Yeah, about that. I called Apex today. There were 0 interviews today. Arthur froze on the threshold. What do you mean, you called? Normally. I know people there. Or maybe they just aren't aware of you. Arthur, where were you today? Silence filled the hallway for several seconds. At a buddy's house. Discussing job leads. And where did the electronics come from? Mom bought them. Huge sale. With whose money? The family money. Valerie felt a cold anger settle over her. He wasn't even trying to apologize like a normal person, just muttering generic excuses, hoping she'd drop it. Arthur, we need to have a serious conversation. Now. Val, I'm exhausted. Let's do this tomorrow. No, now. He sighed heavily and slumped into an armchair. I'm listening. You haven't worked in over a year. You don't look for work. You just pretend to. You blow my money on garbage. When does this end? I'll find something suitable soon. When, exactly? Give me a timeline. Give me a break. 2, maybe 3 months. And if you don't, I will. Arthur, do you feel 0 shame living off your wife? He scowled. What does shame have to do with it? We're a family, we share a budget. Share? Have you deposited a single cent into it over the last 6 months? Looking for a job is hard work too. What work? Sitting in cafes with friends? Val, stop exaggerating. I really am trying to find a decent place. With my qualifications, I can't just take any minimum wage job. And living off your wife is dignified? It's temporary, until I find something worthwhile. Valerie realized the conversation was going in circles. He had 0 intention of changing. The status quo was too comfortable for him. Fine, she said. You have 30 days. If you don't find a job in a month, I'm making a decision. What decision? You'll see. The very next morning, Valerie decided to limit their access to her money. She opened a brand new, secure individual account and transferred the vast majority of her funds into it. On the old joint account, she left just enough to cover groceries, utilities, and gas. It took exactly 3 days for Martha to notice the cash flow issue. Valerie, sweetie, something is wrong with the card. I tried to buy a dress, and it said insufficient funds. How much was the dress? Oh, just $400. Beautiful natural silk. Martha, $400 is too expensive right now. There's only enough on that card for groceries and essentials. A dress is not an essential. The mother-in-law's face contorted in offense. I see. So now I have to beg you for permission for every purchase? Not beg, just coordinate major expenses. $400 is a major expense for our budget right now. Fine. Martha spun around and marched into her bedroom, slamming the door. That evening, an emergency family meeting was held. Arthur and his mother sat across from Valerie with extremely serious faces. Val, Arthur started. Mom is really upset. She says you cut off her access to the money. I restricted large, impulsive purchases. We agreed on a joint budget. Joint means everyone participates in it. Right now, I earn it, and you two spend it. Valerie, Martha chimed in. I know money isn't infinite, but we aren't spending it on nonsense. It's for family needs. A $400 dress is a family need. I need to look presentable when I go out. Your closet is full of presentable clothes. They're old. It's embarrassing to walk around in rags. Valerie looked at her mother-in-law, who was currently wearing a beautiful blouse and skirt Valerie had bought her last month. Martha, you're wearing new clothes right now. This is casual wear. I need something elegant. For holidays, guests, the theater. Valerie was tired of this word game. Every purchase could be justified as a necessity if you were creative enough. All right, she said. Let it be. But any major purchases need my prior approval. What do you consider major? Arthur asked. Anything over $50. Arthur and his mother exchanged a dark look. Isn't that a bit harsh? Martha asked carefully. It's completely fair. Over the next few days, The atmosphere in the apartment noticeably cooled. Arthur became silent and sullen. Martha answered in single syllables and sighed constantly. Valerie understood she was no longer considered a family member. She was a warden preventing them from living comfortably. But there was no alternative. Either control the money or face total bankruptcy within months. The month Valerie had given Arthur to find a job was coming to an end. Unsurprisingly, no job had been found. There were only more promising negotiations and lucrative contacts. Valerie knew it was time to make drastic decisions, but she wasn't sure exactly what to do yet. He used to live off his mother, and now he lives off his wife. The next day, she went to the Department of Labor office and requested a meeting with Arthur's caseworker under the guise of needing an employment verification letter for a bank loan. Palmer? The clerk verified, flipping through her screen. Yes, his unemployment claim has been active for 8 months. He gets his checks, but rarely shows up for interviews. He mostly rejects placement offers, saying he's looking for an executive role. 8 months. That was before they even met. Valerie felt her stomach drop. What was his last actual job? A sales rep at a car dealership. He quit voluntarily a year ago. No development firm. No massive projects. Arthur was just an ordinary unemployed guy living off government checks and family handouts. Valerie left the office with a heavy heart. So, their entire romance was built on a lie. Her husband had pretended to be someone he wasn't from day one, but what upset her even more was the math. If Arthur hadn't worked in a year, how did he afford to entertain her, buy gifts, and pay his share of the early expenses? That night, she decided to test another theory. She waited until her husband was asleep and quietly slipped his wallet from his jeans. Inside were his bank cards. One of the cards actually had Martha's name on it. Valerie went out into the hallway and opened her laptop. She logged into Martha's online banking via the iPad the older woman frequently left unlocked on the kitchen counter. What she saw cleared everything up immediately. Over the last 8 months, steady amounts had been withdrawn from Martha's account. Cash advances, restaurant bills, gifts, entertainment. Everything was funded by the mother's wallet. But where did a billing clerk get that kind of cash? She lived comfortably, spending freely. Valerie scrolled further back into the transaction history and found the answer. 2 years ago, a massive deposit hit the account, $500,000. The sale of a property. That meant Martha had owned a second condo, sold it, and was using the cash to fund her son's lifestyle. The picture was crystal clear now. Arthur had been a freeloader on his mother for a year, and she had happily covered for his laziness. And now, the two of them had decided to shift to a new income source, the wife. Valerie closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. So, she had been deliberately targeted and conned. Arthur specifically hunted for a successful woman to leech off of. But the most hurtful part was that she had allowed herself to be fooled, believed the pretty lies, failed to check the basic facts, and agreed to all his conditions. The next day, Valerie decided to test one final theory. Martha had frequently complained that her apartment desperately needed renovations, which was why they couldn't possibly move out yet. "Martha, when are you planning to start these renovations?" she asked over breakfast. "Oh, sweetie, I just can't get around to it. First, you have to find good contractors, then pick the materials. It's such a headache. Why don't I help? I have tons of connections in the construction industry. Oh, no need to bother yourself. I'll manage somehow. It's no bother. Let's at least draw up an estimate and assess the scope of work." Martha became visibly nervous. "Val, honey, don't rush things. I'm not mentally prepared for a remodel. So much dust, dirt, and inconvenience." Valerie insisted on inspecting the apartment. She walked through the rooms, carefully examining the walls, ceilings, and plumbing. The apartment didn't need a single repair. A high-quality cosmetic remodel had clearly been done maybe 2 or 3 years ago. The paint was fresh, the hardwood floors were in great shape, and the plumbing fixtures were modern. "Martha, everything here is in phenomenal condition," Valerie exclaimed. "Why do you need a renovation?" The mother-in-law looked flustered. "Well, I just wanted to update things, freshen up the atmosphere, but you told me the renovations were absolutely necessary. Otherwise, the place was unlivable. Maybe I'm just too demanding about my living conditions. Valerie realized the renovation story was just another lie. Nobody was planning to fix anything. It was purely an excuse to keep them living together under one roof. That evening, she initiated a serious conversation with her husband. Arthur, we have to talk. About work, about our plans, about our future. Of course, honey. What specifically? I went to the Department of Labor yesterday. His face changed instantly. Why? To find out the truth. You've been collecting unemployment for 8 months. That's before we even met. Arthur sat in silence, staring at the floor. So the whole story about your firm, the projects, the temporary setbacks, it was all a lie. Val, answer me directly. The whole story was a lie. Yes, he confessed quietly. A lie. Why? I thought you wouldn't believe in me if you knew I was unemployed. I wanted to find a normal job first, and then tell you the truth. But almost a year has passed. What kind of job were you looking for, while sitting in cafes and movie theaters? Arthur looked up. How do you know that? I followed you. So, what job were you looking for? A suitable one. I don't want to take just any job for pennies. And whose money did you use to entertain me? What did you use to buy gifts? He went silent again. Your mother's, right? Martha has been temporarily funding you until you get on your feet. Arthur, you are 34 years old. When do you plan on getting on your feet? Soon. I promise, soon. Valerie felt a wave of profound disappointment and anger. Even now, with his lies completely exposed, her husband continued to cling to his illusions. And the story about your mother's apartment needing renovations, that was a lie too. What lie? It really does need repairs. Arthur, I inspected the apartment. Everything is in perfect condition. Her husband sat in stunned silence. So, you and your mother just decided that I was going to bankroll your lives. You lured me into a trap, and now you're living at my expense. That's not true, Arthur flared up. I love you, and I plan to find a job. When? In a year? In 2 years? Or maybe never. I will find one. I absolutely will. But there was no conviction in his voice, only resentment and irritation at having been caught in his lies. That night, Valerie didn't sleep. She lay next to her husband, thinking about how quickly all her illusions had shattered. Just recently, she believed she had married a successful entrepreneur. Instead, she was living with a chronically unemployed man who wasn't even trying to change his life. In the morning over breakfast, Martha, acting as if absolutely nothing was wrong, asked about their weekend plans. Maybe we could go to the theater, or drive out to my friend's house in the suburbs. Valerie looked at her mother-in-law and wondered if the older woman knew her scam had been uncovered. Most likely, Arthur had already briefed his mother on last night's conversation. Yet Martha behaved exactly as usual, smiling sweetly, serving food, asking about Valerie's work. Val, honey, why don't we buy a new TV? She asked, handing her a cup of tea. This one is so old, the picture quality is terrible. Valerie looked at the massive flat screen hanging on the wall. The TV was perfectly modern and displayed an immaculate picture. Martha, the TV is completely fine. Oh, please, the mother-in-law waved her hand dismissively. I saw some models at Best Buy yesterday, absolute marvels of technology. Smart TVs, huge screens, perfect for family movie nights. But this one works perfectly. It works, but it brings no joy. And a new one is only $1,500. For our family budget, that's absolute peanuts. $1,500 for a completely unnecessary TV. Just yesterday, this same woman was complaining she couldn't afford a $400 coat. Valerie began to fully understand the system. Martha was gradually conditioning her to spend money on family needs. First, actual necessities, then things that were just nice to have, then flat-out unnecessary luxuries. We'll stick with the old one for now, Valerie said firmly. Martha pursed her lips. Suit yourself. I just thought you wouldn't be so stingy with your own family. The phrase hit like a calculated insult. The implication was clear. The greedy wife is cutting corners on her family's comfort. Valerie suddenly saw the entire matrix with crystal clarity. Arthur and his mother operated as a tag team. He played the loving husband, experiencing temporary hardships. She played the caring mother-in-law who generously took the newlyweds in. But in reality, it was an incredibly well-oiled money extraction scheme. A week later, an incident occurred that completely removed the scales from Valerie's eyes. Martha asked for money for a new phone. "Val, sweetie, mine is completely broken. The screen is cracked, the buttons stick. I simply cannot survive without a phone these days." Valerie looked at her mother-in-law's smartphone. The screen indeed had a hairline crack in the corner, but the device was clearly functioning perfectly. "Maybe we should just get it fixed? What's the point in fixing that old junk? It won't last much longer anyway. It's better to just buy a new one. A high-quality one will serve me for years." "What kind do you want?" "I saw one at the Apple Store, the newest iPhone Pro. They say it's incredibly reliable. It's only $1,200. $1,200 for a phone." Valerie was taken aback. That was a serious chunk of change, even for her budget. "Martha, that is very expensive. Maybe something a bit simpler?" "Val, sweetie," her mother-in-law pulled a deeply wounded expression. "It's not like I buy a new phone every day. It's a one-time investment, and I'll use it for 4 solid years." The logic was ironclad. Valerie caved, and the next day, she bought the expensive smartphone. Martha was absolutely ecstatic. "Oh, Val, my golden girl, you are so generous. Such a beautiful phone, incredible quality." But 2 days later, Valerie accidentally stumbled across a listing on Facebook Marketplace that made her blood run cold. Brand new iPhone Pro, still in sealed box. Unwanted gift, price negotiable. Local pickup only. 415 Maple Street, Apt 3B. 415 Maple Street, Apt 3B. That was Martha's exact address. Valerie read the listing several times, refusing to believe her own eyes. Her mother-in-law was selling the gifted phone. She dialed the number listed on the ad. "Hello, calling about the Facebook listing. Is the iPhone still available?" "Yes, absolutely." A very familiar, chipper voice answered. It was Martha. "Brand new, still in the shrink wrap. I'll let it go for $900. $900. After it had just been purchased for $1,200. "Why are you selling it?" "Oh, it was a gift, but I already have a perfectly good phone. Why do I need two?" Valerie hung up and collapsed onto the couch. So, her mother-in-law had scammed her from the very beginning. Her old phone wasn't broken at all. Martha had simply decided to make a quick buck off her daughter-in-law by flipping the gift for pure cash. The turning point arrived unexpectedly. Valerie was at her office, drafting an estimate for a new build, when an unknown number called her cell. "Hello, is this Valerie?" "My name is Melissa Palmer. I'm married to Ian Palmer, your husband's brother." Valerie was floored. Arthur had never once mentioned having a brother. "I'm sorry, I had no idea Arthur had a brother." "Yeah, they don't exactly advertise it. I got your number through some mutual acquaintances. I desperately need to meet with you to discuss our family situation." The woman's voice sounded incredibly tense, hiding a deep layer of anxiety. "About what exactly?" "It's better if we speak in person. Trust me, you are going to want to hear this." Curiosity overrode her caution. 2 hours later, they met at a Starbucks near Valerie's office. Melissa was a woman in her late 30s who looked perpetually exhausted and drained. She ordered a black tea and nervously shredded a napkin into pieces. "I am so sorry for invading your life like this," she began, "but I can't stay quiet anymore. My husband and I have been living in sheer hell for the past 2 years." "What do you mean?" "Martha has been lying to us, and she's lying to you, too." Valerie braced herself. "Explain." Melissa unlocked her phone and slid a photo across the table. It showed Martha hugging a man who looked remarkably like Arthur. "This is my husband, Ian, Martha's oldest son. She had him with her first husband, and Arthur with her second, but she hides him from everyone. Do you know why? Because Ian is also chronically unemployed. He's been sitting on the couch for 3 years, pretending to look for work, and Martha pays for our entire existence." The blood froze in Valerie's veins. "She pays for you?" "We live in her second apartment. the one she supposedly sold. In reality, she just transferred the deed to my name to hide the asset, and she funnels us living expenses every single month. She keeps telling me it's just temporary until Ian finds a respectable executive role. But where does she get the money to fund 2 entire households? Melissa let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Haven't you guessed? She brags about you to her friends. She literally says that her Artie struck a gold mine, a rich, hard-working, gullible woman who will fund them. Valerie felt her stomach drop into a bottomless pit. So this whole thing, it was a deliberate setup. Of course it was. Martha masterminded the whole scheme. Step 1. Arthur finds a highly successful woman and marries her. Step 2. Move her into Martha's apartment to save money. Step 3. Slowly condition her to fund all the family needs. Why are you telling me this? Melissa wiped her eyes with a shredded piece of napkin. Because I feel incredibly guilty. At first, Ian promised me it was just a rough patch, that he'd find a job soon. I believed him, but it's been 3 years, and nothing has changed. He doesn't even try. And Martha encourages him to stay lazy. So, what are you going to do about it? I finally got a full-time job. I'm saving up for a security deposit to get my own apartment, but Ian refuses to leave his mom's safety net. He literally told me, "Why break my back when we can live comfortably like this?" Valerie listened, feeling a massive wave of absolute fury building inside her. So, Martha was entirely funding 2 grown, deadbeat sons and their wives. And she was doing it entirely with other people's money. Does Arthur know about Ian? Of course. They hang out constantly and compare notes. Martha literally coaches them on how to properly siphon money out of their wives. She coaches them. Yes. She tells them the golden rule is to never admit the scam. Always string the wife along. Always say the bad luck is temporary. And most importantly, if the wife ever tries to cut off the cash, immediately accuse her of being greedy and unsupportive. Everything clicked into place perfectly. Valerie remembered exactly how Arthur reacted when she tried to monitor their spending, and how deeply offended Martha acted when she was denied luxury purchases. It was all a meticulously rehearsed psychological script. Melissa, do you have any actual proof of this? Recordings, documents, anything? The woman shook her head. No hard evidence, sadly, but you can verify it yourself. Martha loves bragging on the phone, especially to her best friend, Linda. They gossip for hours every night. Valerie burned the name into her memory. Linda. Melissa, thank you for telling me all this. It explains everything. Don't thank me. My conscience was just eating me alive. You work your ass off, and they are robbing you blind. After the meeting, Valerie sat in her car for a long time, digesting the nuclear bomb she had just been handed. She hadn't just been casually lied to. She was the victim of a coordinated, multi-person financial scam. And the most insulting part was that she had actively helped them do it, buying into their pathetic fairy tales about a sick mother and temporary market setbacks. That evening at home, Valerie closely monitored her husband and mother-in-law. Now armed with the absolute truth, she could see right through their performance. "Val, honey," Martha said over dinner, "should we start looking at a new refrigerator? This one is really getting too small for a big family." "Our family isn't big," Valerie replied smoothly. "The fridge is perfectly adequate." "Well, you never know. What if we host a dinner party? Or, when the little ones arrive, we will make do with what we have." The mother-in-law pursed her lips, executing a flawless performance of a wounded matriarch. Arthur immediately backed his mother up. "Val, don't be so cheap. A high-end fridge is a solid investment for years to come." "An investment?" Valerie laughed internally. It was terrifying how skillfully they weaponized corporate buzzwords to guilt her. The next day, she decided to verify Melissa's intel. She waited until evening and listened closely to her mother-in-law's habits. Sure enough, Martha got on her cell phone for a marathon chat session. Valerie crept quietly down the hall and stood near her bedroom door. She could clearly hear Martha's voice. "Linda, you wouldn't believe how difficult Val is being lately. I asked her to buy a new fridge, and she flat out refused. Says it's a waste of money." A tinny female voice responded from the speakerphone. You're absolutely right to keep pushing her. You can't give these career girls an inch, or they'll cut off the cash flow entirely. Exactly. Artie really did find a winner, though. The girl works like a machine. You just have to train her. Keep telling her it's for the family. Women are biologically wired to respond to that. I'm trying, but she's stubborn. She wouldn't even let me buy a new TV. Whatever, she'll cave eventually. The main thing is that Artie keeps backing me up. He's such a smart boy. He plays his part perfectly. Valerie quietly stepped away from the door. It was all 100% verified. They were actively discussing her like she was a piece of farm equipment, plotting how to milk her for more cash. A week later, an incident occurred that convinced Valerie it was time to drop the hammer. Arthur approached her with a massive business opportunity. "Val, I finally found our golden ticket," he announced over morning coffee. "A joint venture into luxury home development. Huge potential. Interesting. Who are the partners?" "A syndicate of private equity guys. Very serious people. They're ready to deploy serious capital. And what do you need from me?" "They want to meet you. To hear about your operational experience. They want to make sure the core team is solid before they wire the funds." Valerie agreed. The meeting was set for Saturday at a high-end steakhouse, but on Friday, she decided to run a background check. She called Melissa. "Melissa, has Arthur mentioned a massive investor meeting to Ian?" "No. Why?" "He says he's meeting with private equity partners tomorrow. He wants me there." "Valerie, that sounds highly suspicious. Arthur and Ian tell each other literally everything. If there were real investors, Ian would be bragging about it. Can I ask around?" "Please." An hour later, Melissa called back. "Valerie, there are no investors. Ian told me that Arthur's plan is to put on a show to convince you to co-invest your own money into this fake venture. So, he's going to pretend these guys are bringing millions, but they're just short on the initial seed capital, and ask me to cover the gap?" "Exactly. And once you hand over the cash, the business goes bankrupt, and the money gets funneled right back into Martha's accounts to fund the family." Valerie felt a white-hot fury ignite in her chest. So now, they weren't just nickel and diming her for appliances. They were making a play for her massive corporate savings under the guise of a fake startup. She decided to attend the meeting anyway. She wanted to see exactly how her husband planned to execute the con. At the restaurant, Arthur introduced her to two middle-aged men in sharp suits. One introduced himself as David Collins, managing director of an investment firm. The other was Stephen Brooks, a senior construction analyst. The charade went on for about an hour. The partners asked Valerie about her operational history, praised her expertise, and expressed their eagerness to close the deal. "This project is a guaranteed home run," David Collins said smoothly. "We are developing a hyper-luxury subdivision in the suburbs. My firm is ready to deploy $2 million immediately." "And what's the total capital requirement?" Valerie asked. $3 million for phase 1. We'll secure the rest via mezzanine financing later. So there is a $1 million shortfall. "Precisely," Arthur chimed in smoothly. "We were hoping you might be open to bridging that gap. With your construction firm as the primary contractor, of course." Valerie nodded slowly, pretending to chew on the idea. "Do you have the prospectus and the LLC incorporation documents I could review?" The men exchanged a quick, nervous glance. "Of course," David replied, "but our legal team is currently redlining the final drafts. Standard compliance review." "I understand. When will they be ready?" "A week or two at the most." "Excellent. Let's wait for the paperwork." After the meeting, Arthur was practically vibrating with excitement. "Well, what did you think? Serious guys, right?" "Very serious," Valerie agreed. "It is a bit strange they didn't bring any actual paperwork to a pitch meeting, though. Corporate red tape. You know how it is. It takes time." "Can I look up their firm online?" Arthur tensed up. "Why? Do you need to run a background check?" "I didn't just pull these guys off the street. It's just standard due diligence. You can never be too careful." "Val, do you really have so little faith in my judgment?" "I trust you, but verifying is just good business." At home, Valerie sat at her laptop and ran a deep search on David Collins's supposed investment firm. 0 hits. It was a complete ghost. She then reached out to a private investigator she occasionally used for corporate background checks. "Hey, Mark, I need you to run 2 names for me. I think they might be fraudsters." She gave him the names from the business cards. "Give me 3 days," the PI promised. 3 days later, the report came back. It was devastatingly pathetic. David Collins was actually an Uber driver named Dave Smith. Stephen Brooks was currently unemployed and collecting disability checks. There was no private equity firm. Most likely, your husband just hired 2 guys off Craigslist to put on suits and play the part for a few $100, the PI concluded. Valerie thanked him and hung up. Her suspicions were 100% confirmed. Arthur was staging a theatrical production to con her out of $1 million. She decided not to detonate the bomb just yet. She wanted to see exactly how far he would take it. A week later, Arthur triumphantly announced that the paperwork was finalized. "The partners are ready to move," he said. "They found the perfect plot of land for the subdivision. We need to secure it immediately. Where are the documents?" "They have them. We're meeting tomorrow to sign everything." "And when do we need to wire the capital?" Actually, they requested a cashier's check or cash upon signing, just to lock in the good faith deposit and skip the bank holding periods. $1 million in cash. "Yeah, it's just cleaner that way." Valerie nodded. The trap was fully set. Tomorrow, they would ask her to bring $1 million in liquid funds, and that money would instantly vanish into thin air. But Valerie had prepared a masterclass in revenge. The next morning, she did go to the bank and withdrew a large amount of cash. But she immediately deposited it into a highly secure, private offshore account that Arthur had zero knowledge of. She told him the funds were ready. "Amazing," Arthur cheered. "See you at the restaurant at 3 p.m. At the scheduled time, Valerie walked into the private dining room, carrying a large, heavy leather duffel bag. Arthur and his fake partners looked like they were going to hyperventilate with excitement. "Well, did you bring the seed capital?" David asked, trying to sound professional. "I did," Valerie said, placing the bag on the table. "But before I hand this over, I have a few specific questions about your firm." "Fire away," Stephen said, leaning forward. "I had my corporate investigator run a background check on your company. Oddly enough, nobody in the financial sector has ever heard of you." A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the table. We're a very new boutique firm," David stammered. "I see. And why don't the names on these contracts match your state-issued IDs?" This time, the men looked utterly panicked. "What data?" one of them mumbled. "The contract says David Collins, but your real name is Dave Smith and you drive an Uber for a living." Arthur's face drained of all color. "Val, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that your private equity partners are 2 guys you hired to play dress-up." The 2 fake investors exchanged a terrified glance and immediately stood up. "We gotta go," Dave muttered. "Yeah, you do. And tell whoever wrote this terrible script that the pitch failed." The 2 men practically sprinted out of the restaurant, leaving Arthur completely alone with his wife. "Val, I swear I can explain this. Don't bother. The picture is perfectly clear." She stood up, grabbed her duffel bag full of gym clothes, and headed for the door. "Val, wait. It's a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding is when someone makes an honest mistake. What you built is a criminal enterprise. When Valerie got back to the apartment, she found Martha on the phone in the living room. The mother-in-law was practically shouting, completely unaware that Valerie had walked in. "Linda, I swear, you'd have to search far and wide to find a sucker like your wife. She works like a horse, and we get to live at her expense." Martha threw her head back and cackled loudly. That was it. The absolute final straw. Valerie quietly walked into her bedroom, opened her laptop, and permanently locked every single joint credit card and bank account Arthur and Martha had access to. Then, she picked up her phone and called a professional moving service. "I need an emergency eviction move out. Today. Right now." "What volume are we looking at?" the dispatcher asked. "Personal belongings for 2 adults. Clothes, documents, small electronics. We can have a crew there in an hour." "Perfect." Her next call was to an emergency locksmith. "I need the deadbolts changed on a high-security door tonight. 7 p.m. We'll be there." When Arthur finally slunk into the apartment, he found Valerie aggressively throwing his clothes into cardboard boxes. "What the hell is going on?" he gasped. "I am packing your garbage. You are vacating this apartment today." "What do you mean vacating?" "Exactly what it sounds like. I am done funding a family of professional con artists." Martha burst out of her bedroom. "Valerie, what do you think you are doing?" "What I should have done months ago. Evicting you." "You can't evict me. This is my apartment." "That is a lie. I pulled the property records. This apartment belongs to a trust left by your late husband, split evenly between Arthur and his brother, Ian." Martha's face went chalk white. "How? How do you know about Ian?" "It doesn't matter how. What matters is that I know every single detail of your pathetic scam." Right on cue, the movers arrived. Valerie pointed to the stack of boxes. "Take all of this. I'll text you the drop-off address." "Val, have you lost your mind?" Arthur yelled. "We are not leaving. You are leaving right this second. If you refuse, I will throw these boxes out the window and let the police physically remove you for trespassing." Arthur lunged forward and tried to grab her wrist. Valerie ripped her arm back violently. "Do not touch me. If you lay a finger on me, you're leaving in handcuffs." "Where are we supposed to go?" "Go crash with Ian. In your other apartment, the one you supposedly sold." Martha looked like she was going to faint. "Who told you all this?" "Melissa. Ian's soon-to-be ex-wife. She told me all about your brilliant playbook for scamming daughters-in-law." The movers quickly hauled the boxes out. Valerie handed the foreman the address to Martha's second condo. "Dump it all there." Arthur and his mother stood in the middle of the empty living room, completely paralyzed. "Val, please, let's just sit down and talk about this like adults," Arthur pleaded. "We have nothing to talk about. You lied to my face from the day we met." "But I love you. You love my American Express card. You look at me like I'm a prize cow to be milked." "That's not true. I spent the last year applying for jobs. I literally heard your mother call me a sucker who works like a horse so you can live for free." "What kind of love is that?" Martha tried to intervene. "Val, honey, maybe we said some things in the heat of the moment, but..." "No buts. Get out. The locksmiths will be here at 7 p.m. "What about our money? Our IDs?" Arthur asked frantically. "Your IDs are in the boxes. As for money, every single card is permanently frozen. You no longer have access to a single dime of my wealth. How are we supposed to get across town? Call an Uber with your own money." Arthur and Martha exchanged a panicked look. They literally had zero cash to their names. "Val, please, just give us $20 for a cab," Arthur begged. "I am not your ATM. We're still your family." "We are not family. Family takes care of each other. You acted like literal parasites." She pulled a single $20 bill from her purse and threw it at Arthur's chest. "This is the absolute last cent you will ever get from me. Now get out." Arthur picked up the bill with trembling hands. "What about the marriage?" "I'm filing the divorce papers tomorrow morning. It will be incredibly fast since we have zero shared assets." "Val, please, get out." Arthur and his mother slowly shuffled toward the front door. As she stepped into the hallway, Martha turned back, her face twisted with spite. "You are going to regret this, Valerie. Who is going to want such a cold, demanding woman?" "That is my problem," Valerie replied coldly. "Your problem is figuring out how to survive without leeching off of me." She slammed the door shut. Valerie was finally alone in the apartment. It suddenly felt massive and incredibly quiet. She sat on the couch, trying to process the absolute chaos of the last few hours. In a single day, her life had been completely rewritten. A marriage built on a foundation of lies was over. Her humiliating role as a financial hostage was over. Her phone buzzed. It was Arthur. "Val, we made it to Ian's place. I just want you to know that you acted incredibly cruelly. You acted cruelly by systematically defrauding me for an entire year. We didn't defraud you. We just withheld certain operational details. Arthur, you introduced yourself as a wildly successful real estate developer when you were literally collecting unemployment. Your mother played a fragile, sick old woman while sitting on a massive real estate portfolio. That's not withholding details. That's a criminal conspiracy. I really was going to find a job. When? Next year? In 5 years? Never? Arthur fell silent. I just thought this arrangement worked well for everyone. You make great money. It wasn't hurting you to support the family. It wasn't the money that hurt. It was the fact that I was being played for a fool. If you had just been honest from day one, we could have built something real. But you chose to use me. Val, let's try again. I swear to God I will get a job tomorrow. No. The trust is gone. There is no going back. She hung up and permanently blocked his number. At 7 p.m., the locksmith arrived and installed high-security deadbolts. Valerie finally exhaled. No one was ever getting into her sanctuary without her permission again. Later that evening, Melissa called. Valerie, how are you? What happened? I kicked them both out to the curb. Today? Are you serious? How did they react? Begged, pleaded, promised to change. I didn't buy a word of it. Good for you. These people are sociopaths. They will never change. They just learn to hide it better. What about you? I filed for divorce this afternoon. I'm moving into my new apartment tomorrow. I refuse to fund a deadbeat for another second. Good luck. Melissa. You too, Val. That night, Valerie lay in bed, unable to sleep. She felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The endless financial drain and psychological manipulation were finally over. But the betrayal still stung sharply. She had spent a year sleeping next to a man who was actively playing a character. Arthur wasn't a loving husband. He was a highly calculated con artist. Every romantic gesture, every compliment, every I love you was just part of the script to keep her ATM machine running. And Martha, the sweet, helpless mother-in-law, was the criminal mastermind who trained 2 generations of parasites. The next morning, Valerie woke up with a singular goal: erase this mistake from her life and never look back. Yes, she had wasted a year. Yes, she had lost thousands of dollars and her naive illusions, but she had finally discovered the truth, and she could rebuild. Her first stop was her lawyer's office. What are the grounds for divorce? The attorney asked. Irreconcilable differences and financial fraud. Any joint assets? None. He never worked a day in his life, and I kept my business in a separate LLC. No children? None. Then this will be a clean break. I'll file the petition today. You should have the judge's signature in 30 days. Her second stop was the bank. She formally closed out the joint accounts and flagged Arthur's identity in the fraud department so he could never attempt to take out loans or credit cards in her name. Her third stop was the Verizon store, to change her phone number. She had absolutely zero interest in hearing his pathetic apologies or threats ever again. By evening, all the legal and financial moats had been built. Valerie went home, poured a glass of wine, and for the first time in a year, felt truly, deeply free. But the peace didn't last long. A week later, the fallout began. First, an aggressive debt collector called her office line. Miss Cross, your husband took out a $5,000 personal loan 3 months ago. The account is in default. We are seeking immediate repayment. Take it up with Arthur Palmer, Valerie replied coolly. We did. He claims he is insolvent, but stated that his wealthy wife would cover the balance. I am not responsible for my ex-husband's debts. Do not call this number again. But the calls didn't stop. It turned out Arthur had taken out multiple high-interest payday loans and financed consumer goods across the city, always assuring the creditors that his rich CEO wife was good for the cash. The creditors were ruthless. A few even showed up at her corporate office, demanding payment and threatening to cause a scene. We know where your job sites are, one sleazy repo man threatened. It would be a shame if your equipment got vandalized. Valerie went straight to the Chicago Police Department, but they were useless. Until they commit a physical crime or make a direct threat to your life. It's a civil matter, the desk sergeant shrugged. Left with no choice, Valerie hired a private security firm. 2 massive, armed guards escorted her to and from her office and job sites for a month. But the harassment didn't end there. 2 weeks after the eviction, Valerie learned that Arthur and Martha were launching a massive smear campaign against her. Her neighbor called her one evening. Valerie, what on earth is going on? Your mother-in-law is telling everyone in the building that you threw your husband out on the street because you're a greedy sociopath. Greedy? She's telling people Arthur was diagnosed with a severe illness, and instead of paying for his medical bills, you kicked him out to die in the cold. Valerie was furious. So now, they were playing the ultimate victim card to destroy her reputation. The next day, a girl from her Pilates class approached her. "Val, is it true you used to physically beat your husband? His mom is posting on Facebook that you're violently unstable and starved him." "It's absolute psychotic fiction," Valerie snapped. "I figured. But people love drama. They're eating it up." Valerie realized Martha was waging a coordinated psychological war. She wanted to frame Valerie as an abusive monster to deflect from their own grand larceny. Valerie immediately retained a high-powered defamation attorney. The lawyer drafted a terrifying cease and desist order, threatening to sue Martha into absolute poverty for libel and slander. But even the legal threat didn't completely stop them. They just got more desperate. One morning, Valerie arrived at her office to find her staff looking extremely uncomfortable. "What happened?" she asked her receptionist. "Valerie, a man and a woman were here an hour ago. They were incredibly aggressive. They said you owed them a massive amount of money, and if you didn't pay up, they were going to go to the local news and expose you as a fraud." Valerie knew exactly who it was. Arthur and Martha were trying to extort her by threatening her professional reputation. That evening, she texted Arthur's new number and demanded a meeting. They met at a neutral, well-lit diner downtown. "Why the hell did you show up at my office?" Valerie demanded the second they sat down. "Why did you humiliate us?" Martha fired back, her eyes venomous. "You sent lawyers after us. You told our neighbors we were criminals. We treated you like a daughter. You treated me like a mark. And you were planning to steal $1 million from me." Arthur looked at the table. "Val, please, can we just drop the hostility? I am ready to start over. For real this time." "No. But why? I swear I'll change." "Arthur, it's been a month since I kicked you out. Have you found a job yet? The market is terrible. You can find a job at a warehouse or a grocery store in 24 hours. You just refuse to work." "Nothing has changed." Martha leaned across the table. "Valerie, what would it cost you to just help us out a little? You have millions. We are struggling to survive. Get jobs, and you won't struggle. In our condition, with our age, nobody hires seniors. Martha, you are 58, not 90. You are perfectly healthy. But the entry-level salaries are an insult. You can't live on that. Millions of Americans survive on minimum wage every day." "You'll figure it out," Martha sneered. "I see. You got rich and forgot about the little people." "I didn't forget anyone. I just refuse to fund able-bodied adults who think they are too good to work for a living." Arthur tried a different angle. "Val, what if I get a job tomorrow? I'll literally take anything." "Like what? A security guard? A stock boy?" "Yeah. And I'll make $15 an hour. And how are you going to pay rent with that?" Arthur hesitated. "Well, Mom said she could help me cover the gap for a bit." Valerie laughed out loud. "So you're just going to go right back to being a parasite on your mother. Nothing changes. It's just temporary." "Arthur, you are 34. When do you plan on becoming a man?" "When you're 50. Valerie stood up. "This conversation is over. If you ever show your faces at my office again, or if I hear one more rumor with your names attached to it, I will sue you into bankruptcy and file criminal harassment charges." "We can sue you too," Martha shrieked as Valerie walked away, for emotional distress. Valerie didn't even turn around. Let them scream. But the nightmare wasn't quite over. Next, the retail creditors started showing up at her house. It turned out Arthur hadn't just taken out payday loans. He had financed massive amounts of luxury goods using her name. "Your husband purchased a $10,000 living room set from us," a representative from a high-end furniture gallery explained. "He paid the deposit, but hasn't made a payment in 4 months. I never signed any financing agreements," Valerie said. "He claimed he had verbal spousal consent as a joint guarantor. He committed fraud. I am not legally responsible for his purchases." "Well, the furniture was delivered to your primary residence. We are legally entitled to repossess it." Valerie remembered the mountain of gifts Martha had purchased using the joint cards. So, they hadn't just spent her cash. They had taken out toxic debt to buy even more garbage. Valerie's lawyer had to step in again. He explained that while Valerie wasn't personally liable for the debt, the creditors could put a lien on the physical property if they couldn't prove it was bought without her knowledge. "We need hard evidence that you weren't involved in the transaction," her lawyer said. Valerie found the evidence. She subpoenaed the security camera footage from the furniture gallery. The video clearly showed Arthur and Martha picking out the furniture, and Arthur forging Valerie's signature on the financing iPad, while the salesman looked the other way. A judge immediately voided the financing contract as fraudulent. The gallery had to eat the loss and take their repossession claims directly to Arthur. The harassment finally stopped. A month later, Arthur made one final, desperate play. Valerie was walking to her car after work when he stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. "Val, wait! Look at me!" he pleaded. Valerie instinctively reached for her pepper spray. "Get away from my car. I'm not here to fight. Look at my uniform." He was wearing a cheap, ill-fitting polyester uniform with a security badge. "I got a job. A real W-2 job with pay stubs. I'm working overnight security at an Amazon warehouse. I make $18 an hour, and I moved out of Mom's place. I'm renting a room in a shared house in Pilsen." Valerie stared at him. Was it possible that hitting absolute rock bottom had actually forced him to become an adult? "Why are you telling me this?" "To prove to you that I can change. That I don't need your money to survive." "Val, please. Can we just try dating again? Just grab a coffee. Like when we first met." Valerie shook her head slowly. "Arthur, the trust is dead. You killed it. But I changed. I proved it. You've been working for a month. That doesn't erase a year of calculated, sociopathic manipulation. Give me 6 months then. If I keep this job for 6 months, will you just talk to me?" "No, Arthur. It's over. Permanently." Arthur tried to grab the handle of her car door. "Val, please, you have to listen to me. I genuinely loved you. It wasn't just about the money. I swear to God." "That is a very bizarre way of showing love. By lying, stealing, and treating me like an ATM. I was going to tell you the truth, but I was so terrified you would leave me if you knew I was broke. And, what now? You want a medal for finally acting like a functioning member of society?" Arthur looked at her with hollow, desperate eyes. He had lost weight, his skin looked terrible, and the swagger of the real estate developer was completely gone. Reality had hit him like a freight train. "Arthur, you had a year to come clean. You could have asked for my help to find a career, but you chose to lie. You thought you were outsmarting me, and you lost everything. Your marriage, your dignity, and your meal ticket. I'm trying to fix it," he cried. "It's too late." Valerie got into her SUV and locked the doors. Arthur stood in the freezing Chicago rain, shouting something as she pulled out of the lot, but she didn't care to read his lips. That evening, her mother called. "Val, honey, how are you holding up? How is the divorce progressing?" "It's finalized, Mom. I'm legally single. And honestly, I feel amazing." "Has Arthur tried to come crawling back?" "He cornered me today. Begged for a second chance. And? People do make mistakes, you know." "Mom, he didn't make a mistake. He executed a year-long financial scam. He pretended to be a millionaire while secretly collecting unemployment. His mother was in on it." "Oh my God. I thought you guys just had a personality clash. It was grand larceny, wrapped in a tuxedo." "Good Lord. You did the right thing, throwing him in the garbage." With the divorce finalized and the creditors defeated, Valerie's life finally returned to a peaceful rhythm. She threw herself entirely into her firm. They won a massive bid to develop a luxury eco-community in the suburbs. The project was incredibly complex, and she happily worked 1-2-hour days, often leaving the office long after dark. The silence of her empty apartment was a welcome relief. Her friends tried to drag her out. "Val, you need to live. Come out to the clubs, let's set you up on some dates." "I'm really not interested right now. You can't marry your blueprints. Right now, my blueprints don't lie to my face." Valerie knew she was using work as a shield against getting hurt again. The betrayal had left deep, ugly scars. The thought of opening up to a man made her physically nauseous. By the end of the year, she got an unexpected update. She ran into Melissa at a downtown bank branch. "Melissa, how are you?" "Thriving." Melissa smiled broadly. She looked 10 years younger. "The divorce is final. I bought a little condo in Lakeview, and I just got promoted to senior account manager. That is incredible." "And what about Ian?" "Oh, he's still decomposing on Martha's couch, looking for a new sugar mama." "You're joking." "I wish I was." Martha literally made fake profiles for both Ian and Arthur on Tinder and Bumble. She sets the filters to find female executives, doctors, and lawyers. They haven't hooked anyone yet, but they are trying aggressively. Valerie shook her head in disbelief. So, they learned absolutely nothing. The Palmer family was a professional parasite ring, and they were just looking for their next host. Is Arthur in on this too? Of course, but he's gotten smarter. He doesn't lie about being a CEO anymore. He tells women he's a consultant between contracts. Less verifiable. A leopard never changes its spots. Never, Melissa agreed. Winter passed peacefully. Valerie completed her massive eco-community project, pulling in record-breaking profits. She bought herself a brand new Porsche SUV and took a 2-week solo vacation to Italy. Life was spectacular. In the spring, she received a phone call that brought the entire saga full circle. It was her corporate lawyer. "Valerie, I thought you might want to know. Your ex-husband, Arthur Palmer, was just arrested by the FBI." "Excuse me?" "Yeah. He ran a wire fraud scam on an older, wealthy widow from Evanston, conned her out of her life savings." Valerie didn't feel a shred of malicious joy. She just felt a heavy sadness for a man who refused to live honestly. What exactly did he do? Same playbook. Met her online, played the charming businessman, married her fast. Then he convinced her to invest in a fake real estate venture, transferred the cash to an offshore shell company, but the woman's nephew is a forensic accountant. They nailed him dead to rights. How much time is he looking at? 2 to 3 years, in federal prison. No early parole for wire fraud. "I guess I got lucky I caught him early." "You didn't get lucky, Val. You were smart enough to look at the math." After she hung up, Valerie sat in her office and looked out over the Chicago skyline. Arthur had finally hit the absolute end of his road. He could have had a wonderful, comfortable life if he had just been willing to work for it, but he chose the path of a predator, and it had led him straight to a federal cell. Valerie, on the other hand, had chosen the brutal, exhausting path of honesty and hard work, and it had rewarded her with an empire that nobody could ever take away from her. She had survived the con, burned the parasites out of her life, and built something beautiful. And that was infinitely better than living a comfortable lie. 5 years later, the Chicago skyline was glowing amber in the setting sun, and Valerie Cross stood on the rooftop terrace of her own custom-built home in the upscale suburb of Oak Brook. The dream she had casually mentioned to a con artist all those years ago was no longer a dream. It was steel, glass, and polished mahogany. She had built it from the ground up, with her own money and her own unyielding vision. Her firm, Cross Construction, was no longer a small remodeling outfit. It was a premier boutique development agency. She had 30 full-time employees, a fleet of company trucks, and a reputation for being one of the most ruthless, competent, and honest contractors in the state of Illinois. Valerie took a sip of her Cabernet and smiled as the sliding glass door opened. "I thought I'd find you out here," a deep, warm voice said. It was Marcus. He wasn't a flashy venture capitalist in a rented tailored suit, and he didn't hand out glossy business cards at expos. He was a structural engineer she had hired 3 years ago to consult on a complex commercial build. He wore scuffed Red Wing boots, had calluses on his hands, and drove a 5-year-old Ford truck. He was grounded, fiercely honest, and most importantly, he treated Valerie as an absolute equal. When they had started dating, Valerie had been terrified, her walls built 10 feet high. On their third date, she had slid a folder across the table, containing a prenuptial agreement and full financial disclosures. She had expected him to be offended. Instead, Marcus had laughed, pulled out a pen, and signed it right then and there. "I'm here for you, Val," he had said. "Keep your empire. Let's just build a life." And they had. They were getting married in 2 months. No massive 500 person banquet, no rented tuxedos, and absolutely zero borrowed funds. Just 50 of their closest friends at a quiet vineyard in Michigan. Just looking at the view, Valerie said, leaning back into his chest as he wrapped his arms around her. It's a hell of a view, Marcus agreed, kissing the top of her head. By the way, Melissa texted you, said to call her when you get a chance, something about a barbecue next weekend. Valerie smiled. She and Melissa had remained surprisingly close over the years. Trauma bonds, they called it. Melissa had fully rebuilt her life, married a wonderful high school teacher, and had a baby boy. Through Melissa, Valerie occasionally heard the pathetic, final updates on the Palmer family. Arthur had been convicted of federal wire fraud and sentenced to 36 months in a federal correctional institution in Indiana. He had served 2.5 years before being released to a halfway house. Now a convicted felon, he was permanently barred from the financial and real estate sectors. The last Melissa heard, he was working the night shift at a massive commercial laundry facility, paying off court-ordered restitution that garnished 25% of his minimum wage paychecks. There were no more tailored suits, no more Panera Bread networking, and no more AMC matinees. Reality had finally chained him to the ground. And Martha, the mastermind of the parasite ring, had met her own poetic justice. After Arthur went to prison, the legal fees had completely drained whatever was left of the money from the sale of her second condo. Ian, her older son, had finally bled her dry, and furious that the cash had stopped flowing, packed his bags and moved to Florida with a new girlfriend, abandoning his mother entirely. Unable to afford her lifestyle or the property taxes on her apartment, Martha had been forced to sell her home at a massive loss. Today, she lived in a tiny, cramped one-bedroom, subsidized apartment on the outskirts of the city. She still spent her evenings on the phone with her friend Linda, bitterly complaining about how ungrateful her sons were and how the world had treated her unfairly. She sat alone in her cheap apartment, surrounded by the fading, outdated luxury appliances she had tricked Valerie into buying all those years ago. "You're smiling," Marcus noted, pulling Valerie from her thoughts. "Good day at the office?" "A great day," Valerie corrected him, turning around to look him in the eyes. She thought about the woman she used to be, the exhausted, overworked girl who just wanted a fairy tale so badly that she ignored every red flag. She had let a family of grifters treat her like a walking ATM. But the fire they put her through hadn't burned her to ashes. It had forged her into an absolute powerhouse. She had survived the con. She had protected her wealth, her sanity, and her dignity. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am," Valerie said softly, setting her wine glass on the patio table. "Lucky?" Marcus chuckled. "Val, you built this entire life with your own 2 hands. Luck had nothing to do with it." "Maybe you're right," she smiled, pulling him in for a kiss. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, and the Chicago city lights began to twinkle in the distance. Valerie Cross didn't need to fake a successful life, and she didn't need to fund someone else's. She had built her own empire. She had found an honest, unshakable love, and for the first time in her life, her ledger was perfectly, beautifully balanced.